One of the things that we've been seeing over the course of the day, as it is really day one for President-elect Donald Trump now, not even the first full day, world leaders are reaching out. They're congratulating him, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, tweeting that Mr. Trump's win is history's greatest comeback. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, calling President-elect Trump's win impressive, adding Ukraine relies on continued strong bipartisan support in the United States. You can read between the lines, hint, hint, nudge, nudge from him there. Richard Engel is joining us now, our chief foreign correspondent. And let's start with that, right? Because Zelensky's sending a message here. He needs the U.S. continued support for Ukraine after Russia invaded here. And that's a real question mark in a second Trump term.
Well, Zelenskyy has experience with Trump.
That's
you remember
right.
when Zelenskyy started out as an actor, played a president on television in a comedy series. He gets elected in somewhat a surprise victory for himself. Then he's dealing with President Trump in his first term. And one of his first interactions is that phone call, which was listened to and then leaked because the people listening to it thought it was so inappropriate, which then President Trump was basically shaking him down, saying, dig up dirt on Biden or we're going to withhold military aid. That was his, you got impeached for that.
Basis for his first impeachment.
That was his first experience with President Trump, right? During the President Trump last time, in which he had this kind of relationship. Now, it's not that just President Zelenskyy is dependent on a little bit of foreign aid from the United States.
It's existential for him.
Because that interaction happened when Ukraine wasn't at war.
That's right.
It was just facing the threat of a possible Russian invasion. Now, Ukraine is deep in the middle of a Russian war. It's losing at the moment. The Russian troops are advancing. Russian troops were just given a whole bunch of reinforcements from North Korea, new weapons from Iran. So they're facing a Russian offensive at the moment, and they are entirely dependent on the United States for financial support, for military support, for the continued flow of arms and armaments and weapons. So he's in a very weak position. So not surprising, the first thing he says is, "Oh, let's talk." He was just here in the United States, meeting with President Trump, presenting him his a so-called victory plan. So he's now wants to make nice.
President-elect Trump says he will end the wars on his first day in office or his first time in office. And there's, I think, some people who read into that when it comes to the
Everybody
Russian invasion.
reads into it one way.
Well, right, which is
I'm going to cut off this aid to Ukraine in order to force Ukraine to make some sort of deal. And
deal being lose some land.
Lose some land. But let's also be realistic about what's been happening in Ukraine. The war has been deadlocked for the last 2 years. So it's not that this current policy was working particularly well. This current policy was somewhat cruel. This current policy gave Ukraine enough to keep fighting, but not enough to win. Not enough to go over the line, because the Biden administration was always concerned that it would provoke some sort of nuclear confrontation with Russia. So he kept the war going, but there were caveats on how the weapons could be used and where they could be used, and the aircraft took forever to get delivered. It's only been in the last few months that the tap has been opened, because I think the Biden administration feared this scenario could happen, so they were trying to get as much there as possible. But the war, as Zelenskyy has known it, the war as the Ukrainian people have known it, is probably coming to an end now.
The other war that we look at is the one in the Middle East, of course. And I think about the relationship that I covered for years, covering that White House, that you covered so much as our international correspondent, the relationship between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and what this means for Israel's war in Gaza.
Well, Netanyahu is having a fantastic day. This is a big something he'd been hoping for. Most analysts expect. He didn't want to sign a ceasefire deal. He had a terrible relationship with President Biden that was quite open, and now there have been several leaks and books that have been written explaining how terrible that relationship really was. But he was hoping that President Trump would come. And when President Trump was in office last time, he and Prime Minister Netanyahu had a fantastic relationship.
Yeah.
It was Trump who moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, gave more concessions to the Golan Heights and the Abraham Accords. And what does Netanyahu want to do now? He wants to take the Abraham Accords and turn it into an Abraham military alliance. He said this in front of Congress, got Republicans on their feet cheering, the MAGA movement in Congress, in the House, celebrating this. So he clearly wants to sell this to President Trump And it seems like President Trump is on board with this mission. Certainly his MAGA base is, and it seems like his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is as well, who tweeted not long ago, no ceasefire. This is the time to transform the Middle East. And this Abraham alliance, what Netanyahu wants to do is redefine the Middle East, giving Arab states and Israel more power, especially if they're in a peace deal together, and tamping down Iran and its proxies.
5 seconds left here, but you
That's
called
all we got,
this in
5
the
seconds.
commercial break biggest story in the world.
Oh, this is the biggest story in the world
Yeah.
by far, and it's going to be for the next several years.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.